and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. All right, we are in the zenith direction of the Amida Sutra. We now will talk about the next Buddha, the colorful and precious flower virtue Buddha. And this Buddha represents the flower adornment sutra, Avatamsaka. So we spent a little bit of time today to talk about the canonical and the historical aspects of Avatamsaka Sutra. Avatamsaka Sutra is an amazing sutra. It is considered to be the king of sutras. And so I thought today we'll talk about its relationship to the whole Buddhist scriptures, Buddhist sutras. Perhaps we take a look at an overview of the Buddhist scriptures and literatures as a whole to see where it all fits. We've been diving pretty deep into the sutras. I thought we'd take a step back and kind of look at Buddhism as a whole, literature-wise. So today's talk is a little bit fundamental of where it fits, and we'll see, hopefully, it provides you valuable information to connect the different sutras, because in Buddhism, it is known to have voluminous amount of sutras, literature. So I thought we'd take a step back and take a look at it as a whole. Sutra here means thread, like you threading your clothes, thread strings. You thread all the discourse of a number of topics in that discourse, in that lecture, in that Dhamma talk. And of course, this is a religious discourse delivered by the Buddha. And Sutra Pitaka is collection of discourses, collections of Dhamma talks. And of course, the principal source, the main source of our knowledge in learning the Buddhism comes from the Dharma, comes from these religious discourses. And the discourses can be given either by the Buddha or Bodhisattvas, or even the Buddha's disciples, either under the approval of the Buddha or under his inspiration. So if the disciple is approved of the talk, then it becomes sutra. It's later on recorded as sutras. And so as you notice, you read sutras, sometimes the Buddha said nothing, or the Buddha was not physically present, but he provided his approval. And later on, when Ananda and the Sanghas recollected of what it was said, they will record it down. Of course, recorded in memory, and then later on recorded down on paper. So there are many stories. For example, there are many stories in the Dhammapada, right? 法句经跟法故. In the Dhammapada, we just have the disciples, the Buddha's disciples in the story. And later on, the disciples would bring the incidents back to the Buddha, explain to the Buddha what happened. And the Buddha would clarify the incidents or the things that had happened with a stanza, a closing stanza, would and approve the disciples of what he had preached. So therefore, the Buddha was not there physically, but he was, because it was with his approval that it became sutras. Broadly speaking, sutras belong to two main groups, Hinayana and Mahayana, right? Hinayana is the little way, Xiao Sheng. And Mahayana, Hinayana is Diutu, and Mahayana is the great way, Da Sheng, or the Daitu. And the later, meaning Mahayana, being those discourses which have been handed down among the Mahasamhikas. So we will go into the different sutras and see how they are categorized. Generally, Hinayana schools do not recognize Mahayanic teaching. But then the reverse is not true. Mahayana does recognize the authenticity of Hinayana's teachings. So we'll go into Hinayana Sutras and Mahayana Sutras. So firstly, Mahayana Sutras. Now let's just to clarify, to help make clarify, we have the Hinayana. Hinayana and Theravada, they're different in a sense that Hinayana is the attitude of more of a self reliance and self interest in achieving enlightenment, achieving spiritual liberation. Whereas Theravada comes from Hinayana. Theravada is one of the many schools in Hinayana, but Theravada is the only school that has survived to this date. So therefore, Theravada is very well known in Hinayana because this is the only surviving school, a well-known surviving school. Now, Theravada is a method of study. It's a school, right? It's not an attitude. So we can't say that somebody is who studies Theravadic text belongs to Hinayana. That's not correct because Hinayana is an attitude. That person could be Mahayana, belongs to Mahayana, even if he or she studies Theravada text. Because Theravada is just a method of study, whereas Hinayana is more as an attitude, a goal, more of a personal goal to achieve enlightenment, to achieve spiritual liberation. Mahayana is both an attitude, a goal, and a method of study. Okay, so I hope that's clear. In the Hinayana Sutras, there are 4 main collections known as agamas or ahan or kin aham. Agamas is in Sanskrit and Nikayas is in Pali. So they're the same thing, they're just in different language. One is in Sanskrit, the other one is in Pali. So although he used, Shankarasita used Hinayana Sutras, but it doesn't necessarily mean that these sutras are all about personal development, personal liberation. One could say that Theravada would be more appropriate, but then Theravada is just a school. It doesn't represent the entirety of Hinayana, because like I said, there are many schools within Hinayana, and Theravada is only one of the schools. But I guess from a categoric perspective, it is correct to say Hinayana. But again, we should not understand that not everything in Hinayana Sutras talks about personal liberation, personal enlightenment. So let's make that clear. So one of the texts in Hinayana is called a long collection, Digha Nikaya, right? Chang An Jing, right? This is a very long text containing long discourses, and there are about 30 in number. There are about 30 of them. So that's a long, and then there's a middle collection, Zung Ahan Jing or Zung Kin Aham. It contains those of medium length, and there are about 5 times as many as the length discourses, Digha Nikaya. And according to Shankarasita, these collections, the middle collections, are the most important. I guess they are mostly reference for research or for Dharma talks. And then the last group of this collection is called grouped collections, or Samyutta Nikaya, right? Za Ahan Jing, where it contains thousands of short sutras arranged by subject. And there's also the Anguttara Nikaya, which is a numerical collections of Buddha's teachings, and it's arranged by according to the progressive number of the terms. And for example, like there in this Anguttara Nikaya, there are 11 chapters, and they are arranged by numbers according to the numerical teachings of it. You have 1, 2s, 3s, 4s, up to 11s. For example, like 1, true Dharma, 一真法界, right? Or number 3 is in terms of 3 jewels, 三宝, 担宝, right? Or 1 is nhất chân pháp giới. Or 4s, for example, like 4 noble truths, right? 四圣谛, right? tứ diệu đế. And then 5 is 5 aggregates, right? You have the 5 aggregates, 五蕴, right? 五ấm. Or 7 jewels, for example, like thất bảo, chi bảo. Or number of 8, teachings of 8, like 8-fold path, right? 八正道, 八真道. And then number 10, like for example, 10 bhumis, like 十地菩萨 thập địa, Bồ Tát thập địa. Like the 10 stages of a Buddha's practice, achievement. So all these books here, they categorize the progressive numerical values of the terms. And then in the Pali canons contains the minor collections, then Khuddaka Nikaya, right? Now these are the smaller collections. For example, like the famous Dhammapada, Fa Ju Jing. And there's also the Jatakas. Jatakas are stories of the Buddha's past life. And of course, the Buddha's past life, you can find these stories here elsewhere too, besides these. For example, like the Vinaya Pitaka. But Vinaya means rules or precepts. Right? Again, they are mainly agamas or nikayas. Right? And we have 3 of them: the long, the middle, and the short. And then we have the grouped collections containing many short stories. Like Dhammapada, right? Fa Ju Jing, Kinh Pháp Cú. Many stories, many interesting stories, many parables. Then for Mahayana Sutras, there are 6 collections, and the first 5 of which represent natural divisions, and then the last consist of independent miscellaneous works. For example, the first one of this group is called Pratna Paramita. And Pratna Paramita is a perfections of wisdom. So it's the sutras about wisdom of Buddhas. And it has more than 30 collections, ranging from thousands of pages to just a few lines. And of course, the primary subject matter of this is called sunyata, right? Voidness, 空性, or 空单, 单空. And this principle here, the principle of voidness or sunyata, is regarded as the profoundest spiritual documents known to mankind. So it's kind of interesting that sunyata here is really it's voidness, but don't be misled by that term. It doesn't mean there's nothing. It's kind of interesting that for a subject of voidness, or for lack of a better term, nothingness, that there are so many texts about nothingness. And this is because nothingness here, or avoidness here, does not mean nothing. This means conditionality. And with conditionality, you can see it's very expansive. There are so many conditions regarding the cause, conditions regarding the effects, right? And so there is a book later on, we'll touch on it, has the 24 conditions, so it's very voluminous. Many, a lot of information within that scripture. And then the next sutra is called Vajrachetika. Jin Gang Jin or Kin Kim Gang. Right? This is famously known as the Diamond Sutra, and it's one of the shorter texts in this class. Vajra here means like some sort of magical weapon to defeat, to destroy something. And in this case, it's to destroy delusion. But in a Chinese translation, Vajra here is translated as diamond, because diamond is a stone, a precious stone that can cut through anything. And so it just represents its sharpness and its ability to cut through delusion. And in this text, the Buddha teaches Supati. Supati is a disciple of the Buddha, Suputi, right, Tubode, that bodhisattvas must vow to deliver all sentient beings to nirvana, all sentient beings in the universe to nirvana, to help everybody to enter nirvana, meaning to achieve spiritual liberation in order to attain ultimate enlightenment, while recognizing that there are no sentient beings to be saved. So that's the beauty of the sutra at the beginning, where Supati, right, Suputi, Dubode, asks the Buddha, how can a bodhisattva attain enlightenment, essentially? How to maintain it, how to maintain a state of spiritual liberation. And we sometimes we have experienced spiritual liberation, but for a limited period of time where we feel very free, we feel very joyful, we don't feel any afflictions momentarily, and then the following day or the following second, sometimes in a short period of duration after that, we feel the afflictions again. So we cannot maintain that. And what that is because our so-called spiritual liberation at that moment is personal, right? There's still egoistic attachment behind it, and so therefore it doesn't last. But whereas here Supati is asking the Buddha, how can you make that last? How can you achieve that state of liberation and still be able to maintain it? And the Buddha's answer is, bodhisattvas need to help all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment, to achieve nirvana, before they themselves can achieve sentient beings. So this is a very interesting sutra. One question could come up is, right, how could I, a mundane being, help somebody who has not achieved spiritual liberation can help somebody to achieve spiritual liberation? So it's kind of contradictory in a sense that how can you help somebody to achieve liberation if you yourself have not achieved liberation? So it's but that's not the point. When we have a chance, we will discuss about that. So just food for thoughts for now. The next group of text, here we have Avatamsaka, and we will discuss more about this because that's supposed to be the main subject of our discussion. And the reason I'm going a big round about it is just to, like a map, right? I want to, instead of diving into the point of interest, I'm taking a step back to show you where that point of interest resides on that map. Is easier to recognize. So that's why I'm taking a big circle around it, just to show you its relativity compared to other sutras, compared to Mahayana and Theravada. So Avatamsaka Sutra has 3 enormous and complex discourses of this name, of this Avatamsaka Sutra, Avatamsaka. And one of which is very well known, and it's called a Ganda Vihua. This Ganda Vihua is 大方广佛花严经来分广佛花严经, right? This is where this describes the spiritual pilgrimage, the journey of youth Suhana, 善财童子, Thiên Tai Dong Tử, who was in his search for enlightenment, and he visited more than 50 teachers to search for the enlightenment, search for spiritual liberation. And this whole, as opposed to, for example, like in the Diamond Sutras, right, talking about emptiness, or prajna, talking about wisdom, and now sunyata. In Avatamsaka Sutra, it talks about the main subject of discussion is about mutual interpenetration of all phenomena, where there is no obstruction whatsoever of objects. So there are 10 stages of the Bodhisattva's career. Yeah. And then the next group of texts here is called Ratna Kuta, right? Kinh Bảo Tích. And also the Maha Samnipata. Now these texts here they consist of much smaller sutras. Ratna Kuta is a text. It's not really a sutra, but it's a collection of important Mahayana topics, such as voidness, 空性, right, 空单, sunyata, and Pure Land. So you can see that in Ratna Kuta talks about a lot about Pure Land, the Western Pure Land, Sukhavati, 极乐世界, and also skillful means, 善巧方便挺少分顶, and also about cultivating compassion and wisdom. So it has variety of topics. Under the Maha Samnipata, it provides us a value in historical of the works in this text, such as this text here, Vimala Kirti Nadesa. So this here is Wei Mo Jing, right? Gen Makak, Yui Makak. Where in this sutra here is about a mystical Indian Buddhist layman winning the debates with elite Mahayana bodhisattvas. So very interesting discussions between this Buddhist lay person and the great bodhisattvas. And also in these texts here, where you can find a long Sukhavati Vihua, which is the Infinite Life Sutra, right? 无量寿经, 跟 vô lượng thọ. So you can see that these texts here talk about Pure Land as well. And then the sixth and the last group of this miscellaneous independent works, among them we have Saddhamma Pundarika. Saddhamma Pundarika is also known as the White Lotus Sutra, right? 法华经, right? 跟法华. In this White Lotus Sutra, there is a famous parable, a famous story of a wealthy father trying to get his children out of a burning house. And this wealthy father, of course, represents the Buddha, and the children busy playing within the burning house, inside the burning house, represent sentient beings. And the parable not only emphasizes of the importance of spiritual liberation, but it also emphasizes that there is only one yana, one way. And such as it's called the Buddha yana, as opposed to Theravada or Mahayana, right? One way Buddha yana, 一佛圣, right? Nikfaktur. As opposed to Mahayana or Theravada, this sutra here emphasizes that there is only one Buddha way. Then part of this last group here is called Lankavatara. Lankavatara here is more of a the subject is more on psychology, the mind, and mind only in this case. So this text here is composed of a series of exchanges between Buddha and Mahamati Bodhisattva. It's another Bodhisattva who represents Ravana. Ravana is a spiritual is a god of spirits. He's the king of the spirits in the land called Lanka. And this Bodhisattva, Mahamati, represents him to ask the Buddha a series of questions. And Ravana is a spirit, but it's not any spirit. He's a special kind, another group of spirits called Yaksa. And these are guardians, spirits or gods that protect earth, trees, and the treasures in there. And they possess supernatural power to fly, to appear or disappear in places. And they can employ those abilities for good or for evil. And this is because they have not reached enlightenment, and therefore they have these abilities, but because there is selfish craving, there is affliction, right? 贪嗔痴, like 贪生死. Because of these afflictions that they are still deluded, and therefore sometimes they can use these supernatural powers for evil. And even when they do for good, it is because of sentimental attachment to those who they are saving. So this book here, this sutra here, Lankavatara, contains the discussions over a wide range of topics, such as like the eighth consciousness, alaya, right? The 第八识, right? thức tám. And the embryo of the Buddhas and mind only, 唯识, right? 于thức. So this sutra here is primarily very psychological. And then we also have another sutra called a shorter Sukhavati Vihuha. And this is also known as the Amida Sutra, right? Amitojin, or Gen Ayida. And where this, of course, we all are very familiar with that, is taught the salvation by faith in Amitabha. And the Amitabha is infinite life and infinite light, right? The next group is called the Abhidhamma. Abhidhamma means about Dharma, about the truth. That's what it means. And this contains the more philosophically more exact expositions of the teachings. It systematizes the terms, the terminologies, and it clarifies the technical terms essentially, and mostly it contains all the terms and the terms and the terminologies, the concepts are taught in Nikaya or Agama, right? Aha, Jin, Ganaha. And so it takes all these terminologies and systematizes all those into one textbook. So Abhidhamma here is really a great achievement in Buddhism. It helps us and it defines the philosophical connections of the terms, and it allows us to more precisely understand what the terms mean, because people have different interpretations. And so here it systematizes all those terms and in this collection. However, if you look at it, there's one negative side of the Abhidhamma, was that it banished human element from Buddhism, removing from the teachings all biographical and historical material, and banishing myth, legends, and above all, like poetry. So it's very dry academic terminology. It's almost like a dictionary, kind of. in Abhidhamma, the impersonal, the scientific, and the rational reign supreme. So it doesn't care about emotion, doesn't care about poetry, it doesn't care about personal interpretations. So it's very reliable in the sense that it provides the exact expositions of the teaching. There are two Abhidhamma Pitakas. Pitaka is Jingzang, right? Gendang. Collections, right? They're collections. One is compiled by the Theravadins, and the other one's compiled by Sarvastivadins. So two different groups, essentially. And then we also have the Dhammasangani. Dhammasangani here has the initial matrix that describes the mind, the materials, elements, form, and a literal summary. So it can be technical. And then there is also another sutra, the gigantic Patana. And here, Patana is a highly abstract work that discusses the 24 modes of conditionality, 缘起, 缘起, such as root conditions, object conditions, affect condition, and so forth. So this book here, if you want to learn more about conditionality, it has a whole lot of information on it. It's also called a book of origination. Origination here is 缘起, right? 缘起, conditionality, a book of conditionality. And the most important Sarvastivadin work here is the Jnana Prasthana, right? This is on the development of wisdom. Okay. Now we know that from Mahayana work, a big contribution comes from Nagarjuna, right? He made big contributions to Mahayana by reviving some of the texts, and also Asanga, Vô Trước Bồ Tát, Vũ Trụ Pusa. But then these philosophical writings, however, they are sometimes referred to as the Mahayana Abhidhamma. But although important as they are and influential as they are, somehow they were never collected into a Pitaka, the collections. Jingzang, Gendang. But anyways, we know because of these authors here that we have Mahayana texts. So we should be very grateful. We are grateful for their contributions. Okay, now we will come to Avatamsaka Sutras. So we just took a quick tour of Buddhism in terms of literature. Right? We have the Mahayana, we have the Hinayana. And in Hinayana, we have the Agamas, right? Ahanjin, Ganaham. Primarily, when of course other texts as well, the long discourses, the middle discourses, and the short discourses. And then in Mahayana, you have 6 categories of sutras, right? From Pratna, Paramita, Bo Jing, right? And all the way down to other sutras about mind only, Wei Shi, Yui Tuk, including Pure Land, Jila Shijie, Sukhavati. So before getting into Avatamsaka Sutra, I want to frame this a little bit more so you have a good appreciation of it. And so I want to bound the discussion and frame it so that you know where it fits in the canonical literature of Buddhism. While the Buddhism of faith and devotion grew up beneath the ages of Madhyamaka school, and also the Yogacara. Madhyamaka is Zhongguan, right? Zhongguan, Dang Zhongguan, where it focused more on wisdom, and Yogacara more on the psychology. It's called mind only. And also Vijna Vijnana Vada, where it talks about the psychology, excuse me, of more on the psychological aspect of the five aggregates, 五蕴, 五暗. So you can see here that here's Buddhism of faith and devotion came from Madhyamaka, the teachings of wisdom. So you can see that faith and wisdom are the emotional aspect of wisdom. They are the expressions of wisdom. And logic and understanding that do not lead to expressions of faith and devotion is not wisdom. For example, like philosophy. For philosophy, there's only logic, right? Object and subject. There is no devotion. It lacks devotion. It lacks faith. So therefore, Buddhism is not philosophy from this perspective. It's not complete. That's why Buddhism is not philosophy. So I want to kind of bound this discussions with the two, you can say the two ends. One is wisdom, and the other one is more on psychology. And Avatamsaka Sutra bridges that gap between the two sides, wisdom and psychology, or meditation. Wisdom and meditation. It bridges that gap. So we have the two ends on with Madhyamaka school, and then the other one is Yogacara. So you know that yoga is a practice of meditation. So Yogacara is really practice of meditation. So these two, although they seem like they are in conflict with each other, but they're not really not. They oppose each other, but really to reinforce each other. So how is that? So fundamentally, in Buddhism, the path to enlightenment is of threefold: morality, meditation, and wisdom. That's the normal traditional path. And Nagarjuna and his followers sided more on wisdom than meditation, than psychology. So they are more on the side of wisdom. And they insisted that wisdom alone was the immediate conditions of enlightenment. Like they didn't care what a person studied, but if he were just to cultivate wisdom, he could attain enlightenment. That was their thinking. And in some cases, wisdom could be attained without prior practice of meditation. So in fact, you don't need, according to this group, according to Nagarjuna and his disciples, one could cultivate wisdom without having to study, practice meditation, and still be able to achieve spiritual liberation, enlightenment. In Theravada, it describes two kinds of emancipation, spiritual liberation, 解脱. There are two types. One is liberation of mind and liberation through wisdom. Right? Liberation of mind is 心解脱, tâm giải thoát. And liberation through wisdom is 慧解脱. Right? 对giải thoát. There are two types according to the Theravada Pali Canon. And by the second, which is liberation through wisdom, one attains liberation without having passed through any four stages of superconsciousness, 禅定, 挺能. In other words, they don't need to practice, they don't need to go through deep meditation, a state of superconsciousness. 视禅, 不要视禅. They don't need to go through those four states of 对挺, 4 states of superconsciousness to achieve liberation, to achieve enlightenment. This type of emancipation is no doubt possible for persons possessing a certain type of temperament, meaning that your ground would need to be fertile already before you can plant. Because a person who has fertile ground, they don't need to work much. They can just plant a seed and simply just water, and the plant will grow. Whereas a person whose field is the soil is dry, very rocky, right? You cannot just simply drop in a seed and pour in some water and expect that seed to grow. There are two different conditions. So perhaps Nagarjuna was talking about the group of folks whose fields are already fertile and can grow trees, grow plants very easily. Of course, if a person who does not understand that, then it gives them a valid excuse for the neglect of meditation. And of course, this is very dangerous because a person who reads Nagarjuna's work and thinks that a person can just achieve enlightenment without needing to practice morality, meditation, and jump right into wisdom, then that is a big misconception, a big misunderstanding. In the absence of any experience of the jhana, 禅定, 听人, a merely rational understanding of the dhammas could easily be mistaken for insight. One might imagine that he was enlightened when he had only mastered the contents of a large number of books. Right? A person who has understood the terminology, the concepts in Nagarjuna's works, and without proper practice of meditation, he is likely to think that he has achieved enlightenment because he understands the concepts. So we need to be true to ourselves. We need to be true to our practice. If we're not of that kind, and we may not need to absorb in deep meditation, but we should at least have a strong foundation of that meditation, and to achieve more wisdom. For example, like the Pure Land School, the criteria to achieve enlightenment are very simple, right? To cause rise to joyful faith and rebirth in Sukhavati, 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới. And then from there, one can achieve enlightenment. So from that perspective, one does not have to go through the 4 stages of jhana, 四禅, tứ thiền. They don't have to go through that to achieve enlightenment. They can take the intermediate steps in Sukhavati, right? 极乐世界, cực lạc thế giới. Then from there, they can spring to wisdom. But we cannot say that that is a typical path, that one can just become a Buddha without practicing morality, without practicing meditation. So that's one side of it, right? One side is wisdom. And the other side is more on meditation, and that is yoga kara. Yoga karans here is 唯识, right? They focus more on the psychology, mind only. 意thức. They emphasize on the practice of meditation. Yoga kara means the practice of yoga. Though yoga kara here was in a sense a reaction against Mayamakaravara, which is on the wisdom side. It was not really a reaction against its general principles, not on the teachings, but really on the approach, how to get there, because they emphasize too much on wisdom and not too much on wisdom at the expense of meditation, meaning that they just focus on wisdom and they don't really, they see little value of practicing meditation. So we shouldn't distinguish between the two schools too sharply. They're not different. They're just different in the sense of practice, but their goals, their achievement are the same. According to Tutsi, this author here, he says that Mahayana may be divided into 2 fundamental schools, right? The 2 poles, Mayamaka and Yoga Kara. So that's why I'm trying to frame this here. The talk here is that I'm trying to frame the two ends and then show you where Avatamsaka Sutra fits. So I'm going a big round here just to show you where it fits on this map, if you will. So these two posts, these two ends here they're not different. We should not take this literally, but they are the same. They have the same fundamental tenets, the same goals, the same achievement, the same ideals. It's just that their approaches are different. The difference was first discussed by idealist schools such as Maitreya, Mila Pusa, Asanga, Uzo Pusa, Vojik Bota, and even Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu is a very famous master, right? Shi Xin Pusa, Taitang Bota. So these here are saying that I guess they're taking exceptions to the emphasis that meditation is not required to achieve enlightenment. And we shall be guilty of no serious error if we concluded that Yogacara was originally a wing of Mayamaka, meaning they came from the same source. Yogacara, they may be different in terms of practice, but they came from the same source, right? And the only difference is that they emphasize the importance of meditation. And this emphasis upon meditation, in the end, somehow it influenced the Yogacarans to modify their whole philosophy. So it came from the same source, but because of the emphasis on their own practice, that somehow it was interpreted to be a different philosophy, different schools. But they originally came from the same source. So that's why we should not take this difference literally, that they're not really different. They have the same goals. There are no conflicts. They have the same goals, but they're just different ways of getting there. And according to Dr. Edward Combs, he mentioned that it was the function and purpose of the yoga currents to give due emphasis to the outlook on the world revealed by withdrawal into trance. Trance here means 听人禅定. So they look at the world from internal reflection. That's how they see the world, that the world is just mind only. So for this reason, it is often asserted that there exists between two schools not a difference of doctrine, but of method, right? They're not two different philosophy, two different goals, but they're just different ways of getting there. While the school of Nagarjuna, Lungshu Pusa, Longtao Bota, Nagarjuna started from the standpoint of logic, wisdom, and whereas the Lankavatara and Yogacara, they came from the standpoint of psychology, and of course, and found a positive basis in actual experience. Here, what Shankaracharya is trying to say here is that the development of Yogacara, Lankavatara, is more from the actual experience and not from some doctrine, not from sutras. So more on the practical side of the teachings, if you will. A difference of method may, in time, develop into a difference of doctrine, right? If you keep emphasizing your own method and you can only see your own method, then eventually it takes its own course and becomes different from the source. So these different views, though not fundamental, they're not different fundamentally, they're the same. They're different on the surface, but the differences were sufficiently numerous and important to constitute Yogacara, an independent school, becomes another school of its own. And with its developed distinctive features, Yogacara tended to think of the transcendental in terms of absolute mind, 唯识, 意thức, chân心, chân tâm. Right? That they see everything from the perspective of the absolute mind. And they try to explain why and how the seemingly objective universe came to evolve out of absolute mind. So everything that you experience, you see, comes from the absolute mind. So that is their philosophy. And this loosely connected, so Yogacara 唯识 essentially is 唯识, right? Psychology, the teaching of psychology here is not very tightly connected to the sutra. It's not really based on sutras very much. It is because the original emphasis was upon individual experience rather than upon scriptural authority. So they base more on practice, more spiritual experience rather than based on textbooks, based on sutras. So that's one reason why that it seems different, that it doesn't seem to be based on sutras. So the teachings may seem different, but really they're not, according to the explanation here. Another reason why it's loosely connected from the sutra is that they systematize the concepts, the teachings, to make their own selections, to make their own, and they ignored many teachings of importance. So they omitted those. So for this reason here, that Avatamsaka Sutras sometimes have been described as occupying an intermediate position between Mayamaka Vara and Yogacara. Mayamaka Vara and Yogacara. Right, one is wisdom, the other one is psychology. Avatamsaka Sutra fits in between. So we've gone around a big circle, so you can see, right? In Buddhism, we have Hinayana, Mahayana, and within Mahayana, you can say two major branches, wisdom and psychology, or wisdom and meditation. And then in between that, you have Avatamsaka. Right? Avatamsaka is an unobstructed interpenetration of objects. 世事无碍, right? 历史无碍, 世事无碍, 历史无碍, 世事无碍. No obstructions between these two. So it feels an intermediate position between these two ends, these two posts, if you will. Avatamsaka Sutra is a collection of three major sutras, one of which is called Gandavyuha. Gandavyuha is 大方广佛花严经, right? 大方广佛花严经. So it's a sutra in the Avatamsaka collection. And this here is the last group of the three sutras collectively known as Avatamsaka Sutra, right? Or adornment of flowers. And it is considered to be the king of Mahayana sutras. Avatamsaka Sutra is considered to be supreme of Mahayana sutras because it's considered to be the summit of Buddhist thought, right? The top, the pinnacle of Buddhist teaching. For Avatamsaka Sutra, though, it also emphasizes about absolute mind. And here, the teaching here is that absolute mind is the sole reality. And its principal theme is the perfect mutual interpenetration of all phenomena, right? 历史无碍, 历史无碍, 世事无碍. right? Lý sự vô ngại, sự sự vô ngại. There are no obstructions, no obstructions whatsoever. Perfect mutual interpenetration. And since every object in the universe is devoid of self-nature, 无我vô ngã, right? No object has unchanging self. That's what it means. Every object in the universe neither finds nor offers any impediment to penetrating or any impediment to being penetrated. Here, there is no, in other words, there's nothing that can block you from penetrating it. For example, Mr. Chen last night talked about conditionality, where with you being here, you are influencing me. But for me to think that I can influence you, I have already been influenced. So there is that interpenetration, right? Right? 你影响我，但是我已经被你影响, right? So to think that I can influence you is a mistake, because I have already been influenced by you. So this influence here, this mutual interpenetration here, is that there is no impediment, no obstruction. 无碍, vô ngại, vô chướng ngại. There is no obstruction, because everything is devoid of the self. Interpenetration, though involving loss of separateness, because it's singleness, right? Single. But it does not mean that there is extinction of individuality. And an example here is the famous Indra's net, right? Indra is the king of gods. He has this beautiful net made of jewels, and the pearls or jewels can reflect other jewels, but other jewels also reflection of the jewels. So you can see that there are reflections of other jewels, but other jewels have reflection of it. So therefore, there's interpenetration. So Indra, the king of gods, has this wonderful net, and it shows you that although the Jews participate in one another's existence, they retain their own identity, right? Even though I can influence you, you can influence me, doesn't mean that you and I are the same. Doesn't mean that we are part of a group, but doesn't mean there is no individuality, right? It doesn't mean that my own ability to become Buddhas is destroyed. For example, you're in a group of folks who are very angry, very competitive, very, you can say, unskillful or even evil, but you are not being destroyed by that influence. You still have the ability to become happy, to become compassionate, to have more loving kindness, to become more sympathetic. But your ability to change is not destroyed. Absolute mind, which presents in all phenomena, everything, instead of obliterating them, reveals their true significance. In other words, instead of when I'm being influenced by you, I'm not being destroyed, but I can learn from it. I can go beyond it. I can become smarter. I can become wiser through that experience and not being destroyed in that experience. So through the doctrine of interpenetration was not taken up by the Yogacara, so important to development that it became a school of its own. Right? Yogacara did not pick up on it, but because of this development so important that it became its own school in China, springing up in China at the beginning of the 7th century, called Avatamsaka school. Right? Hoa Yin Zong, Huang Yim Tong. And it was founded by Tu Fa Shun Da Shi, right? This was the founder of Avatamsaka school. And later on, the subsequent masters of this Avatamsaka schools, and I guess the famous one being Fa Zhang Da Shi, Pháp Tạng Đại Sư. In the year 735, Avatamsaka school Hoa Yin Zong, Avatamsaka school Huang Yim. This Avatamsaka school was introduced into Japan, and it still exists as a living, though comparatively minor tradition. But there is a big influence in a sense that Fa Zhang, Master Fa Zhang, he had interpretations that will help us to understand a little bit more on this. He said in his writing that there is one mind, which is ultimate reality. By nature, it is in its reality, it is pure, it is perfect, and it is bright. 我们的真心 right? 真当 our absolute mind is pure, perfect, and bright. Right? 我们的真心是清净 right? 贪等 真当贪等 And it functions in two ways. One is that by sustaining it, the existence of the world of particulars is possible. And from it originates all activity, free and illuminating. So I guess what this means here is, I guess in Chinese, you can say, 唯心所现, 唯识所变, right? 于当所行, 于thức所变. So that's how I interpret this, because that everything comes from the true mind, all activity. In these two functions, you can say that one is existential and the other one is moral. And there are three universal characters distinguishable. Existentially, from this point of view, every particular object called particle of dust, 微尘, Vijang, it contains in it the whole Dhamma Dhatu, the whole Fa Jie, right? Pháp giới. So the whole universe, you can say, is within this particle of dust. And the particle of dust, of course, is in the universe. In other words, there is no obstruction, no impediment. 事事无碍, right? 事事无碍. That's the one character of it. The second character of this is, from the creational point of view, each particle of dust generates all kinds of virtues. Therefore, by means of one object, the secrets of the whole universe are fathom. So from one particle of dust, it has all kinds of virtues. So everything is in there. Everything is there. And thirdly, in each particle of dust, the reasons of sunyata is perceivable. Sunyata, again, is 空性. 空单 is sunyata is voidness. Against this objective world of ours, so characterize the Bodhisattva's practices four virtues. There are four virtues to this view, to this characterization. One is the virtue of creative adjustment born of wisdom. Love, in this sense, is really virtue of morality. So 慈悲 and 戒, 持戒, 己giới. And then so that's the second. One is virtue of the virtue of wisdom and compassion, loving kindness. Second is virtue of morality. Third is virtue of tenderness towards others, right? Sympathy. And fourth is virtue of sacrifice of vicarious atonement, meaning that you put yourself forward to help others. 无我, vô ngã, like no self. There's no self. So by the practice of these virtues, the ignorant, 凡夫, the ignorant, the mundane beings, are saved from their own delusions. Passions are converted into rationality. From your passion, your emotions into wisdom, and defilements are wiped off. Defilements like 无垢, right? 无垢, like defilements and impurities are cleaned like the mirror of suchness. Suchness is 如来, New Lai, suchness. So as a result of these refinements through the four virtues, that the absolute mind is bright and clean, 清净, 贪等. So in other words, disciplining of oneself in these virtues is not enough to complete the life of devotion. You need to have two support. One is tranquility, and the other one is wisdom. Tranquility here is samatha, meditation. 修止, 止观的止, 止, no, do 止, 止观, 止trong, 止观. It is needed because to keep one's mind one's mind in perfect harmony, meaning there is really no disturbance, no fluctuations, no delusion in being tricked by the outside world. You need to have tranquility. Your mind needs to be untouched, if you will, and not be carried away into a world of multiplicities. If you want to be unspoiled, be unobstructed, you need to have one foundation, and that is tranquility, practicing meditation. However, the tranquility alone is not enough, because it will lead to a state of self-complacency, and it will destroy your sympathetic motivation. 你的慈悲, right? tam từ bi. It will destroy, 破坏你的慈悲, right? Sẽ phá hoại cái tâm từ bi của mình. It will destroy your loving kindness, your compassion. And therefore, that's why we need to practice vipassana, meditation. That is 修观, 度观. So samatha means stopping, right? 止境, it's stopping. And vipassana is to see, right? 观 is 观. Vipassana means to see. So they complement each other. You have to have tranquility, to not being affected by the outside world, but you don't destroy your own compassion by practicing vipassana. To understand the Avatamsaka, there are 6 contemplations, thinking about, right? 思维, 6种思维, tư duy. You have to think about this. And one is to look into the serenity of the mind, the purity of the mind, the calmness of the mind, to which all things return. So bring yourself back, essentially, to your true mind, your true nature. And then the second is to look into the nature of the world, of particulars, which are because of the mind. Because of the mind that you have experiences, because of the mind that you see the existence of the world. And the third is to observe that there is perfect, mysterious interpenetration of all things. 事事无碍, 事事vô ngại. There is no obstructions in things, how things are influencing each other, but without destroying their individuality. And fourth is to observe that there is nothing but suchness, that it is suchness. And number 5 is to observe that the mirror of identity holds in its images of all things without obstructing each other. So the mirror of identity. without obstructing one another. And then lastly, number 6 is to observe that the relation of master and attendants exists in a most exhaustive manner throughout the universe, so that when any one particular object is picked up, all the others are picked up. So in other words, one is influencing the other, right? The fact that you are here, you are influencing me, but I'm also influencing you. We are interrelated. When one thing is affected through conditionality, whether great or not great, everything is affected. In this sutra, a chapter, a sutra within Avatamsaka Sutra, Ganda Vihuha, which is the last of the 3 sutras, it describes about the journey of Suhana. And Suhana, 善財童子斷大龍隊. Suhana was inspired to reach enlightenment, and that's why he traveled throughout India to seek advice from more than 50 teachers on how to reach enlightenment. The first teachers that he met was Bodhisattva Manjari. Manjari, Wen Shu Li Pusa Wang Tu Si Lai Bo Tai. He taught Siddhana the method of Buddha mindfulness, 念佛, how to be mindful of the Buddha. That was the very first method of reaching enlightenment that Suhana received. Of course, and the objective of his journey was to achieve the highest knowledge of enlightenment. All of these 50 teachers here, they may be perfect in their own right? But they are not. They were not sufficient in teaching Suhana how to achieve perfect enlightenment. So therefore, after they had taught him whatever they could, they advised him to go on to the next teacher to learn from the next teacher. Finally, Suhana met Bodhisattva Samattabhadra Puxian Pusa Phổ Hiền Bồ Tát, who alone among them is in the possessions of knowledge he seeks. So Samattabhadra is able to show youth Suhana how to reach perfect enlightenment. And of course, the youth pilgrim eventually receives full instructions as regard his life of devotion, his knowledge, vows, supernatural powers, and so on. He was able to achieve all that. And sooner as he realized that the import of those profound teachings, he then discovers that his state of identity is the same as his teachers, the same as Samattabhadra, the same as his last teacher. Not only that, but the same as all the Buddhas. In other words, he was able to achieve the complete enlightenment. So what does this mean here? Is that the first teachers show him the 24 forms of Buddha mindfulness, that method. And the last teachers, also known as the King of 10 Great Vows, show him a path to full Buddhahood. And I listed the 10 great vows here, but due to lack of time, I won't go into that. But these 10 great vows, all bodhisattvas will need to practice these 10 great vows in order to achieve Buddhahood. And then at the end, Bodhisattva Samattabhadra vows for rebirth in Sukhavati. So then one logical conclusion is that youth Suhana's journey from beginning to end, it all leads to Sukhavati. That's where you are more likely to find attainment of enlightenment in Sukhavati. and then the description, the sutra goes on to say that like there's like the bodies of the Buddhas, Suhana's own body is of infinite extent. It expands infinitely, like the Bodhisattvas. His enlightenment, all merits and virtues, eloquence, his voice, faith, cung tở hay công đức, all of his virtues, merits and virtues, are the same as the Buddhas, same as the great Bodhisattvas. And Suhana is able to move about in a world full of light and color. So let's wrap this up. You say that in Buddhism, we have two categories. One is Mahayana and the other one is Hinayana. Mahayana, there are two categories, two major subcategories. One is logic perspective, and that is wisdom, and that is our famous, well-known, beloved author Nagarjuna, Long Su Pusa, Long Tao Bo Tai. And then the other side is you have your the psychology or meditation, and we have our beloved masters, Vasubandhu, Shi Qin Pusa, Thái Thăng Bồ Tát. Right? And Avatamsaka Sutra occupies an immediate position between these two posts, these two ends. Right? So from Nagarjuna to Vasubandhu, they taught Sukhavati, they encouraged and they praised Sukhavati. And Avatamsaka Sutras, at the end, it leads Suhana to Sukhavati. So the practice of ethics, meditation, wisdom, right, 戒定慧, giới định tuệ, all leads to Sukhavati. And Avatamsaka Sutra, in Avatamsaka Sutra, used Suhana with his 50 teachers, one leading to another. Right, from the first teachers, Bodhisattva Manjuri, to the last teacher, Bodhisattva Samattabhadra, it all leads him to Sukhavati. And so it shows us the significance of Pure Land. From the perspective of logic and from the perspective of psychology or mind or meditation, Pure Land fills that gap. Right? In other words, if you want to reach enlightenment through logic, it is not easy. If you want to reach enlightenment through meditation, it is not easy. But where it is more of a probability, more within our reach, is the practice of Pure Land, right? To get to Sukhavati so that we can reach nirvana. Now we can reach nirvana, reach enlightenment. Okay. And then he goes into the details of Suhana's experiences after he had reached that state. And there where he learns about the state of perfect mutual interpenetration, right? 事事无碍, 实实无碍, right? And about the reality of absolute mind by appealing to the imagination and to intuition. And then it goes into, I'm kind of running out of time, but let me see here, what's more relatable. Okay, so again, let's kind of summarize this to wrap up and to show you what we have just talked about. So we have already seen that Avatamsaka Sutra occupying an intermediate position between Mayamaka and Yogacara, right? Mayamaka had declared that all things were in reality sunyata, and Yogacara, after identifying sunyata with absolute mind, it explains that all phenomena were mere just consciousness, all from the mind, from the true mind. And Avatamsaka took up this idea of essential non-duality, that in terms of unobstructed mutual interpenetration of all existing objects. Just as the jewels of interest reflect each other, so all things are reflected in absolute mind, and absolute mind is reflected in all things, right? You influence me, but at the same time, I'm influencing you, right? We are influencing each other without destroying our own individuality, right? Mayamaka is the doctrine of sunyata. That is the principles subject of the doctrine. And then Yogacara is the teachings of absolute mind, right? 唯识约thức or 真心正当. And Avatamsaka Sutra is the conceptions of mutual interpenetration. Okay? All right, so that should wrap up today's discussion. So I hope you have a better appreciation of where Avatamsaka Sutra fits within the canonical literature in Buddhism. Okay, just to remind you that the classes in July will be July 11th and July 18th. We will not have class on July 4th because it's a holiday, and I'm sure you will enjoy the holiday, and I will probably take advantage of that time to prepare for these classes because they are next to each other, right? Back to back. Okay. All right, let's do dedication. Okay, if you could please join your palms together, we recite. May the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the paths below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. If you could please rise and we bow to the Buddha 3 times to show our respect. All right, first bow. Second bow. And third bow. Amida Society.